consuming an extra unit of a particular product. It is the utility derived from the last unit of a commodity purchased or consumed. As for the example cited the other time of the ice cream, the third ice cream the student consumed gave the utility of 10, which make the increase of total utility from 36 to 46. That means the 10 satisfaction, the 10 utility that such a student derives from that the third ice cream is what we refer to as the marginal utility. That is the additional utility that such a student derive, and that is marginal utility. For example, we have this table as an example. The first column is showing the ice cream consumption of a particular student. The second column is showing the marginal utility, and the third column is showing the total utility. And you discover that when the student consumed the first ice cream, the total utility was 20, and when the second ice cream was consumed, the total utility increased to 36. That means this difference between the first and the second utility is what we refer to as additional utility, which is 16. Therefore, we can also say when the third ice cream was consumed, the total utility increased to 46. So the difference between the second and the third utility is the addition between the two, which is 10, and 10 will therefore be our marginal utility. And it continues like that until the last one. And if you from the diagram, you can see that when the fifth ice cream is consumed, there is still the total utility still remains 50. When the fourth ice cream was consumed, the total utility increased to 50 from 46. The difference between 46 and 50 is 4. Therefore, the 4 is marginal utility, is the additional or extra satisfaction derived. And when the fifth one is consumed, then the total utility still remains 50, and marginal utility happen to be 0. In that case, there is no additional satisfaction derived between the fourth and the fifth consumption of that ice cream. And if the consumer or the student now continue to get another extra one, which will make it the sixth one, then the total utility will reduce to something like 44. In that case, the difference between 44 and 50 becomes minus 6. That minus 6 is what we refer to as this utility. That means it doesn't give any satisfaction again, but it's giving dissatisfaction. In that case, the ideal thing for such consumer is to stop consuming such products at that moment in time. And the table that has been shown can be represented in this diagram, which is the graph showing the relationship between marginal utility and total utility. The first at the top is showing the graph of the total utility, how the consumers continue to increase, how the utility of the consumer was increasing little by little until it reaches the highest point. And after reaching the highest point, that highest point is showing the point where the consumer reached the highest level of satisfaction, which is the point of 5, when the consumer was consuming the fifth ice cream that was yielding no more satisfaction. Therefore, any consumption at that moment will be a minus, will reduce the total utility. And that is why from that point 5, the total utility started falling even to 0.6. Then the total utility was reducing. And also, the other diagram at the bottom is the diagram showing the marginal utility. Marginal utility was increasing. Initially, it was at the highest level. Later, it was decreasing little by little. The first one happened to be 20, followed by 16, followed by 10, followed by 4, 0. You discover that it started reducing little by little until it gets to the fifth one where there is no more any level of satisfaction. And the extra consumption of such products lead to what we refer to as disutility, which is minus. And that is where the point at which the graph begins to fall under the total utility. And the point where total utility reaches the highest point is the point that the marginal utility will become zero, which is when the fifth product, the fifth quantity was consumed. And immediately the total utility started falling, the marginal utility will become negative. And that is the point, the point the satisfaction sets in, where the consumers derive no more satisfaction from the consumption of such products. And the ideal thing at that moment is to stop the consumption of that product. Therefore, we can see the relationship between the total utility and marginal utility as explained with the diagram and with the table. In the diagram, you can see that the ice cream show along the x-axis we have the total utility and marginal utility being shown with the ice cream, and the y-axis shows the level of satisfaction in total and the additional level of satisfaction derived. These are the relationship between the marginal utility and total utility. But we can categorically state that when the consumer go on to consume the unit of the commodity continuously, the marginal utility will continue to reduce. The marginal utility derived will continue to fall constantly, while the total utility at first will be increasing, and later it will get to a level where there will be no more increase in total utility, but the total utility will start falling. From the above statement regarding the consumer behavior, the relationship between total utility and marginal utility is deduced as 1. While marginal utility is at the rate of marginal utility is the rate of change in total utility. That is the difference between the total utility at one point to the other. That is the rate at which the total utility was increasing. This is another way we can describe marginal utility. And when marginal utility decreases, total utility keep increasing but at decreasing rates. Total utility keep increasing but at decreasing rate. Look at the table that we shown the other time. Marginal utility was decreasing from 20 to 16, 16 to 10, 10 to 0, 4, 4 to 0, 0 to minus 6. But the total utility was increasing from 20 to 36, 36 to 46, 46 to 50, 50 to 50 again, and 50 to 46. You discover that total utility keep increasing but at decreasing rate, yet marginal utility was decreasing. Also, when marginal utility becomes 0, when marginal utility decrease until it gets to the level of 0, the total utility will be at its maximum. And that is what the point we call saturation point. That is the maximum level ever. And that is the point at which the consumer is supposed to stop consuming such products. If consumer continue to consume at that after that point, then the consumer will not derive anything, but the product may have negative effect on consumers' health. Also, when marginal utility becomes negative, then the total utility will begin to reduce, will begin to decline, will begin to fall. And that is how it's being shown on the graph shown to us earlier. Also, we have law of diminishing marginal utility. The fundamental assumption of utility theory of demand is that the satisfaction that a person derives in consuming a particular product diminishes or declines or falls as more and more of that goods is consumed. That is, the more you consume a particular product, the satisfaction that to be derived from the consumption of that particular product will be reducing. Citing an example of someone that is thirsty and want to buy ice cream, as cited the other time, the first ice cream taken by such person will gave the utility of 20, the second one gave utility of 16, and so on like that. It begins to fall little by little, and that is what the law of diminishing marginal utility is talking about. In other words, a successive quantity of goods consumed, the utility derived from the consumption of that goods will continue to fall. This is called the law of marginal utility. Under another point that we need to take note is what we call indifference theory. Another theory that explains the consumer behavior is what we call indifference preference theory. Economist Fedro Pareto developed this modern approach to consumer behavior. Under this approach, that analysis of consumer behavior is described in terms of consumer preference of various combination of goods and services, depending on the nature rather than from the measurability of satisfaction of our previous discussion of utility theory. Under the latter theory, consumers' tastes and preference were presented by the way of total utility and marginal utility. That is the theory the theory of indifference preference theory. Then we also have